there is a discipline which has now come to to the forefront. It was already there. It was there from the 1970s, but was not being recognized by the conventional economics departments all over the world, because conventional economics always assumed that we are rational. When it comes to dealing with money, there is indeed a part of our mind which cannot think rationally, and there is no shame in looking at that fact, no shame in admitting that. You would be surprised to know it has nothing to do with you as an individual. You would be surprised to know even the smartest of the people in financial area, the experts, the so-called financial experts, they end up making absolutely horrendous mistakes. There is in fact a book, and I have a copy of that book. That book is called $1 Billion Mistakes, and that is about people who have spent 15 years, 20 years, 25 years with extraordinarily successful record of managing money, suddenly dropping $1 billion on something which completely contradicts the fact that they are experts, they are rational, they know what they are doing. So I'll take you through the thought processes of how this whole science, which is now called behavioral finance or neuroeconomics, has come about. That economics is not about rational man. Economics is about irrational behavior, and that is the norm. That is not abnormal. What we need to do is train ourselves to make ourselves to move away as much as possible from irrational behavior, because irrational behavior is something that comes to us naturally, not rational behavior when we face money. I'll share another small anecdote. Another person, Harry Markowitz, who actually got a Nobel Prize for discovering, which is now the fundamental basis of investing world, which is asset allocation, that you need to put your money in bonds and in stocks and in gold or whatever in different proportion instead of getting exposed to a single asset class. He has created what is called an efficient frontier. If you start with only bond, your returns will be low. If you start with only stocks, your returns are going to be very volatile and you never know what's going to happen. So there is an optimum mix by which you can keep adding stocks and you can create what he calls an efficient frontier. At a certain point, it's the most efficient mix of all assets. Story is this: when Harry Markowitz was asked, how did you invest? He said, 50% in bonds and 50% in stocks. The man who discovered the so-called efficient portfolio. Now, I start with a small quiz, and there is a prize to this quiz from the person who answers this the fastest and obviously the correct one. Here is the quiz. A chocolate bar and a toffee together cost 11 rupees. The bar alone costs 10 rupees more than the toffee. So what is the cost of the toffee?
No.
It's over. I think it's
Wow.
1 rupee, 1 rupee, 1 rupee. I heard 3 answers. It's wrong.
Mr. Meron said 50 paisa.
Absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. In a room full of people, one person was quick and he was right. This is absolutely rare. Think about it. It's 1 rupee, it's 10 rupees more, not 10 rupees. If it was 10 rupees more and the toffee alone is 1, then the chocolate would be 11 and the whole thing put together would be 12. It's 50 paisa and 10.5 is the cost. So 10.5 is 10 rupees more than 50 and 2 together is 11 rupees, right? Here is another one. Which of the 2 lines are longer? Quick, you lost your chance. A lot of them have said both are same.
No prize.
No prizes for this. Okay, now there's an interesting thing about this, This is a study that was done in the 1950s and it's now classic. Every single book on psychology has this, or behavioral finance has this. But when you ask people, having gone through this, said this, they have been secretly, videotaped. And people have been seen looking at this for minutes and minutes and minutes together to figure out how the hell does one not look more than the other, longer than the other. If you look at it carefully, you can say that together. but you almost try to disbelieve your own eyes or your thought process. You feel that what am I seeing? One definitely does longer than the other, right? Now, if you know about this, it's fantastic. Something similar in a different situation, you will trust your eye and you will not trust your thought process. I'll show you how. Third example, no prizes for this. These are now, we are on to presentation. In 99, Computer Literacy Incorporated changed its name to fatbread.com. The stock went up 33%. Can this be explained by the concept of rational man? That only the change of name of company, next day the stock went up by 33%. Similarly, a whole lot of companies changed their name to .com, .net or internet in 1999, and they all as a group outperformed even better quality technology companies as a group. We are comparing like and like. We are not comparing with Procter & Gamble. They outperformed these other companies by 63% only by changing the name in this particular manner. Example number 4 of rational thinking. This is a study done on wines, right? There are 5 varieties of wines which were presented on a table, and these were labeled. So there was a $5 wine, there was $45 wine, and people had to taste it and say, please rate them. So here is the price and the wine, and you please rate them. As you can very clearly see, something that's $90 obviously got a fantastic rating, all right? And something that's $5 hardly got any. 45 was better, 35 was like 44. So roughly between them, the rating that they got matched the price. And here was a trick. There were only 2 kinds of wines, or rather, there were only 3 kinds of wines. The first and second was the same, and third and fourth were the same, and there was a third kind of wine. Now, the moment you say that the moment you take the price away, look at this situation. One here was $10 and $90. They were labeled as 10 and 90, and see the difference in the way people rated. When the rating was away, it was same wine. There was no price attached to it. They rated them as the same level. Look at this example of wine 2 and wine 2, which is both the same quality of wine. So, moment you put a price, people start to think, oh, it's different, it's more expensive, it's better. This is not rational thinking, right? All this is happening inside our brain. The same brain, this is a creation of the Mayans thousands of years ago, the same brain which could create something like, which is a wonder of the world. Look at the dimension, look at the perfection of what people could achieve in Latin America thousands of years ago. The same thing went in Egypt or India or Ajanta Ellora, which is phenomenal what human beings have done. Alright, we are not foolish people. We have created civilization, we have created wonderful things to do. Let's look at the brain that creates this fantastic civilization, as well as make the foolish mistakes that I talked about earlier. Our brain accounts for 2% of our normal body weight, alright, but it consumes 20% of the oxygen you take in and the calories that you burn. The reason being that it's never at rest. It's constantly reacting, judging, concluding, assessing, all of these things it has to do. The interesting part is how it does any of these things. There are 2 sides to the brain, and this is an ad which was created by Mercedes-Benz to play on your mind, to say, listen, this is a right brain decision that you're supposed to take. Here is this fantastic car. Don't think from the left side. Why? The left side was kept completely gray and colorless, because that's where all the thinking happens. You're not supposed to think. Here is this great car. Please pay the money and drive away. Alright? There are 2 brains. What do? The right side, which is the reflexive side or the reactive side of the brain, it is quick, it's intuitive. Think of these words, just think a little bit deeper on these words. It's quick, so somebody has to react very quickly. Chocolate costs 10 rupees more than the toffee, you have to quickly react, you have no time, alright? So you reacted with the help of your right brain. It's intuitive. So a lot of things that you are quickly able to judge with the eyes. Suppose you are driving, okay? On a normal situation, along the road, there's nothing. You are assessing everything on the side. There are cars, there are houses, nothing is happening, but your mind is constantly absorbing all from the right side. The moment something runs across, it has to react very, very quickly. It has to be on the state of alertness, again from the right side of the brain. So it is intuitive, it's quick, it looks for patterns, always tries to assess risk and reward, again very quickly, and very, very subjective. The moment somebody walks into the door, I look at him, I try to make assessments. He's long, short, fair, not fair, well dressed, all these things I'm constantly doing. The key thing, it's rapid, it's automatic, and I'm not even conscious. All of these things I have to do in an unconscious manner all the time. Please remember, this is quicker than the left brain, and this is the cause of all our troubles, and this is the reason why humans have survived. But I'll get to that in a while. The reflective side of the brain is logical. It organizes your experience into different categories so that when you, in future, you can draw upon the category. It's like drawing upon a library, from the book on a library. The books on markets here, if you don't remember, you can't come here and do this. All right? So you remember. So that all those things that this brain does for you. It creates theories about cause and effect. So you know that spring comes after winter. You remember that next time there is a winter, you would know that the spring comes after it. So there's a cause, effect, the rotation. It plans for the future, which all you are supposed to do with your money, and you are supposed to do it with your right side, with your left side of the brain. This is ideal. This part of the brain has to be utilized for dealing with money or analyzing all the situations relating to money. Unfortunately, in our normal lives, on a day-to-day life, it's completely overtaken by the reflexive brain, which is quicker, which is faster. And there is a solid reason for this. I'll give you a quote by a very famous neuroscientist who said that evolution has designed our emotions to make us want to do what our ancestors had to do to survive. How is that? Remember, I said our brain reacts first and thinks later. And there is a biological reason, which is what the neuroscientists had said, that they had to do. Why? Because they were hunter-gatherers seeking mate, shelter, food, pursuing prey, and avoiding predators. In a situation like this, thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago, they had to react first and think later. They had no choice. They had no luxury of thinking. And remember, in a situation like there is yellow and black stripes, it's probably a tiger, and you run first and you think later. All right? Now, from that situation, we have come to a situation where we have to decide whether to buy a ULIP or an endowment plan, or whether to do systematic investment plan, and whether to sort of pay on your credit cards and so on and so forth. It's badly designed equipment for that. The reflexive system, as I said, has served us very well for millions of years. Confronted with anything random, we quickly search for known patterns. Is this kind of intuitive decision making good? It is certainly not. The fundamental reason for that is that a lot of things our ancestors found in nature has a pattern of its own. As I just described, that during a certain part of the year it rains. And if it rains, you can do certain things with it. When it doesn't rain, you can do certain other things. Next year, that pattern is repeated. All right? Most of the time, this is what they found. If it was wrong, didn't matter. They found it very quickly and they had to correct themselves. Anything to do with human man-made world, modern life is much more complex. It's much more random. It is not the way the rainfall happens a particular time of the year in every season. It is not like that. It's a combination, as somebody described markets as, and I repeat that again and again, it's complex, emerging, adaptive system. Imagine, it's complex, it's changing, that is evolving, and it's adapting. So next time it's different. It's different set of complexity altogether. It's not the same set of complexity that you've known. All right? And in a situation like this, a reflexive action is going to mean deep trouble. This is a gentleman that I mentioned who's really the father, along with Amos Tversky and Richard Thaler, who's really the one person who has created the discipline called neuroeconomics or behavioral finance or behavioral science. According to him, the combination of optimism and overconfidence is one of the main forces that keep capitalism alive. He only refers it to capitalism. I say this is really the basis for civilization. If something goes wrong, you have to be optimistic. You say, no, this is not the whole life. I mean, I have slipped. Let me reapply. Remember, Edison had failed probably 43 times before he actually invented the bulb. the owner of Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders, he actually started the business when he was 63. So if people were not optimistic, if people were not confident of themselves, they wouldn't have created the wonderful things that they've created through years, through civilization. Unfortunately, overconfidence, optimism, all of these things are pretty bad for dealing with financial situations. And I'll just deal with 4 or 5 of these, which is confidence, incentive, stroke greed. You will see how what is normally an incentive in a certain situation can quickly turn into greed. A desire to make prediction. Without predictability, humans would not have been able to create the wonderful scientific discoveries that they have. They wouldn't even gone in that direction. People would have stayed at home. They would not have sailed seas, for instance. One of the greatest debates around the world would be whether Christopher Columbus was greedy or he was only responding to incentive. When he failed at 4 or 5 different places and eventually got the Empress of Portugal or some such person to actually fund, which is a modern day venture capital, so give me some more money, I want to sail the seas and see if I can conquer, the new world. And eventually forget and surprise. How many times we forget what we learn, or how many times in a day or in a month, bigger, smaller surprises that we feel. Confidence. I'll give you not what I think, but as much as possible, I'll quote numbers and facts, and that is just going to establish where I come from and what I'm saying. In 1965, 2 psychiatrists, Carolyn Preston and Stanley Harris, rated 50 drivers in Seattle on the skill, ability, and alertness. This is a survey that they both had done. 65% of the drivers said they were at least as competent as others. Many of them described their recent experience as extra good or even 100%. Now, this was extraordinarily surprising because Preston Harris had done all the research interviews in the casualty ward of a hospital, and all of these drivers were there. Why were they there? Each one had begun the most recent trip in his own car but ended it in an ambulance. Injuries ranged from concussions, crushed pelvis, broken bones to spinal damage, and 3 of the passengers had actually died. According to the Seattle police, 68% of them were directly responsible for the crashes, 58% had at least 2 past traffic violations, and 44% will ultimately face criminal charges. But only 5 of the 50 actually admitted that they are even partially responsible for the crashes. So much for confidence, so much for human rationality. Here is another study. Subjects were placed in front of a computer screen which showed 6 positive events and 6 negative future life events. When these came up, they had to press a computer key which was written me, and another one was written not me, which effectively meant that here is a statement, or it applies to me or doesn't apply to me. So depending on that, they had to press the key. In the study, 4 of the 6 positive life events they said would happen to them, but only 2.7% of the negative. All the bad things is going to happen to somebody else, not to me. In fact, the most interesting part of the experiment is when they reduce the response time, which is what happens in the market when in a fast-moving stock, or when you're supposed to sign something quickly or a discount is ending, you have to react quickly. Remember, our ancestors had to react very, very quickly to save themselves. We react quickly in a money situation, and in fact we get even more confident, even more optimistic about ourselves. So 4.7, it went from 4 to 4.7, and negative was down to 2.4, right? One of the things that drive human civilization is really hope for the future, hard work, incentive. Why do we believe in all of these things? We believe in these things for a very, very simple reason. Because in our normal lives, we see a very clear cause and effect relationship between what we do and what we get. All right? So this is the reason why parents tell their children, study harder. You are only second, you might come first, because there is a cause and effect relationship. And there is a desire to do better and better, which is why people excel. You see an example like Usain Bolt and so on. It's all a question of self-actualization, self-fulfillment, pushing ourselves to the limits. when we desire something, something happens in our brain. There's a whole lot of neurons are pushed out, which are called dopamine neurons, right? Interestingly, scientists have studied and found out that the moment you get something that you are desiring, the neurons start falling off. So there's no more pleasure anymore. And this is the reason why we keep striving, because to obtain the same level of neuron activity, we have to do more, one level more, right? Which, excuse me, you want to sit out if you're bored? Yeah, you seem to be yawning more than listening. So in healthy situations, it's called an incentive. In an extremely unhealthy situation, the same thing will flip over into a situation of greed. Now, imagine a multi-level marketing scheme. So you got your first month's check. Somebody has promised you 35% return, maybe. So you got your check, you want more. According to various studies, people lose money in multi-level marketing schemes or chain money schemes, not because the chain stops at some point. Even the early guys lose. Why? Because after they've got the returns, they put the money they've got and the principal again back into the scheme. This is what happens. For the same neural level of activity, dopamine says more. So you go and put the money back into it more, expecting even more. So that is where, if you don't work hard enough, it's moved from an incentive situation to a greed-like situation. I have no better example to prove this than the example of one of the greatest scientists ever, which is Sir Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was remarkable. He's actually changed the course of physics forever. After he came on the scene, as we know, he's discovered the three physical laws. He discovered gravity. He was a master of the Royal Mint. He's got incredible achievements. People don't know that he created the ridge that you see on the coins was his creation, so that people can't counterfeit the coins. He was a master of the Royal Mint in UK. Of all the quotes and examples that you find of people who've lost money globally over hundreds of years, one of the finest comes from him. And he said that it's much easier to estimate the movement of heavenly bodies than figure out the movement of stocks. He said that after losing 50% of his life savings, and he was a master of the mint at that time, in what is called the South Sea bubble of the 1720s and 1730s. So this is a situation where a scientist, he knows what he's doing, he's excelling more and more and more, have moved from his own incentive system and moved to a greed kind of a situation where he doesn't have to work, he thinks the money can come in very easily. And we have examples. Don't blame Isaac Newton, we are all the same. He is like us, we are like him when it comes to dealing with money. It's exactly my point. Some more surveys which prove how normal individual investors or even professionals react to it. 74% people think more about gains, where only 7% of the people think of losses. Again, dopamine at work. Big gains intoxicates us to make even bigger bets, exactly what the scientists have found in terms of dopamine neurons charging. The more a market rises, the more greedy people get. In any kind of a situation you find, and I was reading a book of 1911 or 12 or something. Here was this guy, he went around the stockbrokers' offices and listed down, he was very curious of how many people would have bought near the market peak and who are these kind of people. So at that time only about 40 odd stocks I think were traded in New York Stock Exchange, so it was very easy for him. So General Motors or some Continental Steel or whatever. So he went around asking for brokers that I don't want the names. You tell me how many people from your office would have bought all of these stocks within 20% of the peak. And he found 80% of all retail investment happened at 20% of the peak prices of all of these 40 stocks. Same thing, this was in 1911 or 12 or so on. If you remember, the same thing happened exactly in the market peak of 2000, same thing in 2008. Once the price goes up and there are big gains you're making, somebody else is making, at that time it starts firing much more in our mind and we go for bigger and bigger bets and therefore we lose tons of money.